good morning, gentlemen. Happy 2026.
And you.
As a sad individual who likes to consider the long-term impacts of financial crime, what it means for our colleagues and friends in trying to actually deal with a changing economy, do we think that His Majesty's government understand the impact of their taxation policies, which, in my view, enable greater or encourage greater criminal activity in day-to-day lives? I know it's a leading question, but do you see where I'm coming from? There's a finger being waved at me.
Because I'm sorry, I'm pointing at Des, but of course it's on a screen, so he doesn't know where I'm pointing. I'm pointing at him.
It was the angle that had me concerned, Nigel. I didn't know whether it was vertical or
it was horizontal, not vertical. Yeah, got it.
There's one or two. Yeah.
Des, you have a you have some thoughts on this, because we've talked about it before, where I have a view, which is that it is actively encouraging people to look for ways to avoid compliance with the law, not compliance in the compliance regulatory sense, which basically makes them think that they're going that there is mileage in becoming a criminal. But you think that that's a bit too harsh?
I think it's the way it's working now. More and more people are inadvertently breaking the law because of the way the regulations are phrased nowadays, and what's happening with taxation, what's happening with the way the government are ruling at the moment. More and more people are now considered under the new regulations and the new rules and the impositions made by the government, that we're finding more and more people are now doing something that is illegal, even though they didn't consider it illegal prior.
So we're falling onto this problem that the government is changing law so much and in such fundamental ways and in such illogical ways in many respects, that the previous concept of saying not knowing the law is no defense is now becoming a very hostile position as against almost everybody in the country.
I think for me, and I'm open to comments here. If you look at specific areas of heavily taxed activity that government doesn't approve of, the classic one here is booze and cigarettes. If we are to believe the figures from the IEA that were published in September 25, overall the number of cigarettes bought on the legal market fell by 45.5% between 2021 and 2024. And that is a big source of revenue. You probably have the figures, gentlemen, between you as to what actually that meant for the exchequer. But I can't help the feeling that we're not seeing all the markets for cigarettes. After all, if you can smuggle them in from EU countries, boy, what a killing you're making in open markets in various places around the country. I believe there was a BBC documentary that actually trundled around the northeast, going to various local shops and asking if they had anything under the counter, and quite a lot of them did.
Yeah.
And that's one area. Now, I'm not saying, courtesy of the Chancellor's last budget in November last year, that there are suddenly going to be all these illegal milkshake parlors springing up in order to avoid the tax on milkshakes. But I am saying that in cigarettes, booze, and I probably suspect petrol, but have no figures on that, petrol and goods like that, that this government and the previous Conservative government learnt nothing from the classic example of this, which was the American banning booze and hooch in the 20s.
I kind of see where you're going for. Two things that hit me straight away now when you use that comparison. Number one, obviously, as we're talking, there's an awful more restrictions on protests nowadays.
Oh yeah,
which means you and I, who most people would consider, well, I definitely consider myself to be a law-abiding citizen, could fall foul of that. And the other side of it is the austerity measures and the welfare cuts that one sees nowadays, because if there's lack of affordable housing, people falling into, I don't want to say poverty, but into hardships, which leads to increasing crimes because maybe they can't pay their bills, so they become fined, and then they've got a fine. It's leading to disruption and, in my opinion, civil disobedience. That's where it's all going to.
You've got to bear in mind that, first, on your syntax, it amazes me that there is a tax on condoms. The second thing is, when you've got a population that is being driven into poverty like that, but there is a nominal safety net, then the obvious thing to do is not to go down the road and not hit a little old lady over the head to steal her the remnants of her pension, but just to commit benefits fraud.
So the Bulgarian gang that got done for, I think it's 52 million. I think this is yesterday, so late December, were ordered to pay back 2 million.
Well, that's fairly profitable, then, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so, yeah, absolutely. And in that kind, and focusing on, if you're
sorry, on that, most of that money's been moved on, so there wasn't anything paid back. You got your Baroness Own situation where they.
No, but hang on a second. Is Bulgaria not a treaty country? Or are there no MOUs with Bulgaria?
Well, no, this is
how does it become part of the EU and outside any enforcement section arrangements? Surely being part of the enforcement arrangements is part of the requirements that have to be met before a company accedes to the EU. And I know the UK is outside the EU, but it did manage to replace most of its treaties.
It's how law is enforced or isn't. I mean, so you now have plenty of evidence that even the Met Police can't deny that organised crime is behind quite a lot of the watch and valuable snatching in London. The phones and such like go out to gangs to China to be processed, and the Met Police's answer to this is not actually enforcing law and order in an equal, even-handed and transparent fashion. It's to say that all the actual manufacturers should put disabling devices in there. Now, you don't live in fear in Amsterdam of having your phone snatched. You don't live in fear in Paris of having your phone snatched. It has become part of. You
can walk down the street and there are innumerable young women with their phones stuck in the back pocket of their jeans, and anybody can just walk up, pick it out.
For me, it is, and again, I'm very concerned about the developments of an OPBAS and how we actually proceed with regulating financial crime and conduct in that area. It's not about actually the end in itself, preventing crime, creating a safe thing. It's about being seen to follow various fashionable political diktats.
Absolutely. I've been saying this for years, that we are no longer, the prime objective has been lost behind a hedge of looking good.
So how do we warn people who are coming into this area, the young professionals, the people who will be taking this forward, and say, how do you protect your sanity, your professional reputation, and your way forward in doing the right thing? Indeed, is there a right thing in this level of regulation?
I think there's a stage before that. We need to get the public at large aware of the risks that are omnipresent. And there's absolutely no point in saying to anyone in a financial institution, it's your job to stop this, when the volume is so massive, because there is such lack of interest in stopping it before it happens in the first place. And fraud awareness, money laundering awareness, and drugs trafficking, the cigarette trade, all of this stuff, which is criminal enterprise, that happens before it comes anywhere near a bank. And so, whilst what you're saying is right, we should be looking to help the young people coming into this. That's one reason why it's more difficult than it should be. The second one is that a lot of them have come through an education system where they haven't done anything on their own. I was horrified when I started recruiting here in Malaysia, that when I would say to programmers who would come and say, I've worked on this project, say, okay, so which part did you do? And the answer is, oh, well, it was a team. And they couldn't point to a single thing within a program that they had designed. And I now see that people working in financial institutions are saying, oh, but we can't be expected to know everything or to do everything. We have to we have to work in collaboration. And my answer is, well, no, you don't. Because if you look at Standard Chartered in New York, the Department of Financial Services in New York specifically said, you've got to have one person in New York who is our point of contact and who we will be able to attack. And there is this view amongst the young people coming in that they can all just sit around and drink coffee. They can sit on their bean bags and play pool or whatever, have a chat about it, and the job's getting done. No, that's not that cannot happen. They've got to get their hands dirty. They've got to get deep and dirty into it, and they've got to understand that there is individual responsibility that they cannot shirk.
And yet, playing the devil's advocate card for a moment, how many senior managers, say in the UK regime, have had their collars felt for systemic failure?
Pretty much none.
But that and this is the point. Government talks one message and delivers another. I fear. Des, am I being too generous or am I being too harsh?
I don't know. Has this conversation gone on to the regulatory side of things, or are we still talking about the government side of things?
I think we've merged. I think we've merged the two subjects.
Sorry, yes, I apologize.
I mean, sorry. Answer to your question, Mark. From personal experience over the last probably more than a few years, but bearing in mind there's increased legislation against what was previously allowed to be done, which was previously legal. From a compliance perspective, I can look in some boardrooms, there's an open disgust of compliance and risk. I can see it in their faces as board members. And so much so that I often think that those looks actually would give a lemon a run for its pucker-inducing grimace, to be honest. It's the same look as if they have sucked a lemon. And it does concern me that that there's always this "it wasn't me, Gov" attitude that's going on. Now, you know, when we look at, I've seen some signals over the last 18 months in terms of what's going on with financial crime. And one of the things we were talking about was actually the predicate crimes and the non-predicate crimes. And what I've seen, what I suspect, and it hasn't really come out, but there seems to be a pattern arising with, certainly in the UK legislation and the EU legislation. It's no longer about policies and procedures or, you know, focusing on the tools being used. What happens now in most of these companies, it used to be looking at fraud and AML and sanctions and transaction monitoring as separate verticals. Nowadays, I think that financial crime, what I've seen over the last 18 months is that criminals use all the systems across all services. And so therefore, anything that's available. Now, the regulator wants financial institutions to find it and act accordingly. Well, it doesn't really work, does it? Because there are so many different silos. So, you know, I think their message is you don't need a criminal conviction for there to be serious financial crime failings. And that's the bottom line of that. Regulatory breaches, systemic control failures, governance weaknesses, they're all serious outcomes in their own right.
Mm.
Do we think that the pursuit of an arbitrary regulatory standard, because they are arbitrary, because they must be arbitrary, because every regulator has different standards. So do we think the pursuit of an arbitrary regulatory standard and the imposition of penalties for falling foul of that standard, do we think that's now the prime objective rather than the prime objective being the reduction of financial crime?
Yeah, I think the scrutiny is on the non-predicate side of the business.
Yeah.
So it's on the non-crime. It's on regulatory, administrative offences, not on criminal offences. I agree. Which is where, from my point of view, as a risk strategist, it's all completely tits up, because the whole point about this, the whole point of the way the law was originally drafted, was to identify predicate crime, the people involved in predicate crime, make reports so the prosecution could go after them, bang up the bad guys, confiscate the money.
Well, if we have a look at,
I don't see that now. I see the plan as being to go after the banks, screw them for as much as they can in terms of penalties, and not bother about the bad guys.
I think you're right. 18 months more, and it could be more, but I'm only going back 18 months, which includes 2025. And for me, I think the message coming from the UK regulators and the EU regulators is you don't need a criminal conviction for there to be serious financial crime failings.
And this is one of the
regulatory breaches, systemic control failures, governance weaknesses, they're increasingly treated now as serious outcomes in their own right.
Yeah.
And that's the shift.
Yeah.
And, you know, we haven't had a shift in how money laundering, financial crime has been looked at since the 90s, if you want. And I think the regulators are slowly coming that way. You know,
well,
they're bringing in all this thing about conduct risk and consumer duty, you know?
Yeah, I took the view in the training course that was released late last year. I explained that what we saw in the 2002 UK legislation, which has largely been adopted worldwide, the approach, not the actual legislation, is that there was an ideological shift which went towards the money rather than towards the criminals themselves. And I think that shift has now mutated again to exactly what you're saying, which is that it's not even about the money anymore. It's about what we can make the financial institutions liable for.
Yes.
And they're not the number of cases which are pursuing assets is tiny. But the number of cases relative to the global criminal population, but the number of cases which are pursuing financial institutions of one sort or another for penalties is massive relative to that population. I think that's fundamentally flawed.
I think I talked earlier, previously, before we started this, about bringing the concept of health and safety into the financial crime arena. Now they're looking at victimization, because you know, the underlying instructions are that, you know, if your controls in your financial institution allow customers to be misled, exploited, or exposed to some harm, that's a financial crime issue, even if there is no money involved. So it's
I think it's very easy to get confused by using the words financial crime in relation. You're right, it is all financial crime related, but there is the financial crime element, which is what criminals do, and there's the regulatory element, which is non-crime, but is nevertheless treated in an enforcement way. And it's the regulatory element that I think is now dominating and is rapidly becoming out of control.
I wonder if this is the front line for the 200-year-old clash between British and European law, particularly the Napoleonic Code, which is where, for those who are not familiar with it, and this is a huge generalization, forgive me, but that which is not legal is illegal under the Napoleonic Code. In the UK, it is the other way around.
I have explained this in relation to the way that motor racing regulations work. In the UK, then local, if you're going club racing, then there is a very clear line. You can do what's in the rules and nothing else. Whereas you go to international rules, like the FIA for Formula One, you can do anything you like so long as the rules don't preclude it.
It's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think this, when we are discussing, if you like, the symptoms of this, and there's been no, as far as I can see, public discussion that's been permitted by HM Treasury and those with a vested interest in FinCrime, because it puts people on the front line, in my view, in an impossible position.
Well, as a common lawyer, and you know,
you can't. Sorry, I won't say you can't get more common than that. Carry on.
No, you're true. It's true. But yeah, we're all from very different backgrounds, and mine is as a lawyer. And as a common lawyer, my attitude has been very simple: that it is the courts that ultimately decide whether or not somebody's behaviour is appropriate. And one of the things that was very clear during the European years is that we were increasingly being pushed down a path of detailed codification.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened. And in fact, this was raised during the withdrawal debates by the Lord Chief Justice, whose name I can't remember, who said specifically, this is a battle for the, well, he didn't use these words, but effectively he said, this is a battle for the soul of British justice. Do we have, do we continue with the common law, or do we adopt a codified system of law?
Yeah, and that's a fair point. And let's not forget that it was only a few weeks ago that our wonderful Deputy Prime Minister decided that what we need is to remove the jury from all of this process. And on that happy thought, ladies and gentlemen, this is where I'm going to say that's where I'd welcome comments from our viewers. You know, are we making this up? Are we getting too stodgy? Are we getting out of our pool? Or should we?
Well,
should we be getting out of our lane?
The question of juries. Getting out of our lane. Here you go. Another enforcement that's going wrong. My son nearly had a car crash. Was nearly taken off the side of a cliff last week.
Oh wow! Sorry to hear that.
By the automated lane monitoring system in his car.
Yeah.
And he said if he hadn't managed to override it, then he and his family would have been taken off a cliff.
Yep.
Now this is the stuff that the European Union says you've got to have this stuff in your cars. Oh, it's an example of the type of technology they are insisting on.
Yeah.
And that would have been the entire family wiped out just because the tech is stupid. And so I thought, this is pretty drastic. So I looked it up, and there are many examples of people having crashes because the lane monitoring, the lane changing system is defective. And yet,
I would love to see it work in places like Cornwall, rural Cornwall, where if you're following the white lines, they suddenly disappear and you merge into a very large hedge, or a tractor lay by, something like that.
Some years ago, I wrote the worst car I'd ever driven was a Mercedes AMG, and the damn thing crashed itself. Well, it didn't crash itself. It kept telling me that I was in constant danger of hitting something, but the something was the tall grass alongside the lane, alongside the road and the lane. And then something came, and I moved just inside the tall grass, and the beep didn't change, and I hit a fence post. Come on, this is ridiculous. If it hadn't been making the noise, I would have been all the time, I would have noticed. So this is an example of where compliance technology, and that's another thing that I find is a big problem we have today. We are being told to rely on compliance technology, and at no point can we guarantee that technology is working. Be it on cars, be it on, we can have governors on old-fashioned spindle-driven machines because they work mechanically. But the moment you start to introduce anything which is electronically variable or algorithmically driven, it doesn't work reliably.
I think you're right, because we one of the concepts that I've been looking at, if you want going forward, because we talked about last year, coming forward, I think it's operational and technology risk nowadays, especially in financial crime. Again, going back to what falls under enabling that, because I think the regulators should be looking now at just think of these phrases. How often have you heard it? Poor data quality, system outages, inadequate access controls, over automation without human oversight, AI, etc., etc. But the most important one that seems to be coming out is third-party tools that firms don't fully understand. I can give you perfect examples where I helped a company bring on a new third-party tool, and it had over 400 rules that you could apply in the transaction monitoring part of the system, which was fine. But this company had taken what was already in the package when they bought it. And I did the review, and they only had 43 of these 400 in that package that was sold to them. And they hadn't reviewed it and looked at it. You know, technological failures, as far as I'm concerned, wherever, especially in the financial services sector, they shouldn't be treated as neutral accidents. They should be assessed based on the harm that they're causing within the industry and potential. But, you know, AI has been talked about now for 2 or 3 years, you know, and how many times have well, maybe you haven't, but I've heard people saying, oh, we use a blockchain analytics provider. And I say to them, great. So
what does it do?
Who reviews the outputs? Who challenges the false positives or the false negatives? Who decides what level of crypto risk, for instance, is acceptable within blockchain? Okay, oh, well, we use this well-known crypto analytics, or one of these 2-3 well-known crypto analytics. But nobody's going any further. And this, again, is this over-reliance on technology to bring the answer. And I think both Nigel and myself are kind of, we've said it often enough, Mark, haven't we? I know. And often I get told off for it, that the certification that people the certification that people are gaining nowadays gives them no practical experience or even the ability to think. Nobody's questioning, nobody's asking that good old question, you know, what is it that I'm looking at? What is wrong? What is the absence of the normal? Yeah,
it's the ability. It's the ability to question.
Desmond, you and I have talked before. Mark, I don't think so, but he really should have been part of this conversation. That this idea of companies that should get somebody in to review the technology that is sold to them and implemented by their own people. And yet, how often do we three, between individually, get called in to do that? I'll start. None.
No.
And there are very few people who understand the technology and understand the issues that it's dealing with as well as I do. And yet, nobody says, "Come and have a look at this for us."
It's effectively it's going to be the issue if senior management suspect that there is something that they're not happy with. They will go to a list of people that are approved by their regulators, of which the major international accounting firms are right there at the top, and go, oh, well, they have the experience, let's just buy them in, and they can buy them in as cover.
And in fact, you're right that if you look at what the FCA have as their list of approved experts, it's the very same people that have implemented the stuff that's going wrong.
Correct.
I mean, it's absolutely dumb.
The same firms have been caught by their own AI reports producing complete slop.
Yes. I don't like the word slop, because the word slop, in many cases, it's misleading. They are selling their products. They're selling fraudulent reports on the which to me is just incredible. Why are companies not reporting them for money laundering on the profits that they're making from selling fraudulent reports? Okay, well, I know that.
Again, it goes down to the over-reliance on technology, and it seems to me a sad fact of life that a lot of the generation of compliance people are just relying on the systems to give them the answers rather than looking at something. I've asked somebody, you know, a perfect example if you want. If you identify a business that involves plants and flowers being produced in the Netherlands, which Netherlands is well known for, and they're selling it in Italy, you kind of go, where's the business relevance in this? Because it's going to a region in Italy that is famous for its mafia type groups. And why is suddenly everybody surprised when actually it's a screen for the traffic of cocaine and reinvestment of the profits?
Well, this is where we come back. This is where we come back.
You tell me that a transaction monitoring system can pick that up, or AI is going to pick it up. I keep hearing people saying AI is getting better and it's going to be doing this and it's going to make our life, everybody's going to lose their jobs. What it doesn't do for me is actually say, look at that. Does that make sense?
I think there are two things there, Des. How many modern compliance officers and compliance teams have the time to actually sit back and think about what the hell's going on in front of them? Because a lot of those operations are run very, very lean.
Yeah.
And the other one that worries me, as you rightly say, is, oh, AI will learn in due course. Well, what will it learn?
Yeah.
Because the large language models and variations I've seen will learn an awful lot of, and I'm going to irritate Nigel here, sloppy thinking. Okay,
it's not even doing sloppy thinking.
Yeah, you know, you're right. I take the correction, because they're not thinking.
What it's taking is the result of people having pissed in the data pool.
Yeah. And the problem you're going to get is experience is expensive. And we are in my experience in financial services, we've gone from being a client-focused business to a transaction and numbering processing business, at which the client and customer is right at the very end.
Well, they're just the data point, aren't they?
And that again is because we're not learning from our customers or clients either, because we don't have the time to do it.
There's a good old-fashioned word that seems to be out of favour nowadays. Is persistence.
Yes.
I think persistence is equally as important as the ability to gain a certificate for someone working in a regulatory environment.
If they've got time to go and get yet another certificate, they've got time to learn the bloody basics of the job.
Correct.
Yeah, but you see, of course, how many are actually in long-term careers with the same institutions these days? And credentials are an important part in the HR process these days of protecting their backside, saying this person is at least theoretically qualified for the role that we wish for them.
Well, there's the first problem, isn't it? These things are seen as qualifications when they're actually just commercial certifications, and they're not qualifications. There are very few worldwide qualifications to do with money laundering. There are one or two central banks that have their internal schools where they take the view that what comes out of that school is a qualification, but the vast majority are just relying on tie-ins, which seem to me to be rather corrupt in many cases, with large international training organizations, and the training is just teach these people to do what we want them to do, don't actually teach them to think.
That's always been my issue, and this may be another discussion for another time. However, the three of us, I know that the sums of our ages add up to more than 3 figures. I get that.
A long way north of 3.
I get that. However, I've experienced this personally. In that I often have to go through interview processes just for some of the consultancy work I do. And I often wonder, and this may be a subject for another time, the psychology of interviewing somebody who is the same age as your parents. Yeah. Instead of all this talk that I see on LinkedIn about ageism, nobody's saying that the concept of the interviewer is looking at somebody who, as they've grown up, they've respected their parents. And then they're looking at somebody on a screen most of the time. It's not physically face to face. And they're looking at somebody who is as old or not older than their parents. And so this old cliche about you're too experienced, I don't get it. They're not sure. And I think that whole interview process is being overtaken by everybody calling it ageism.
I think the problem there is, I think there is ageism, but I think the problem in that specific example is that the people who are doing the interviewing are terrified that someone's going to come in as their junior and know far more than they do, and they're going to show them up.
I certainly think that's a major issue. Looking a little more broadly, there's a wonderful marketing guy from Rory Sutherland from Ogilvy. Does some fantastic talks on all sorts of issues, from electric cars into how effective marketing works and what people respond to. And one of his concerns is that when organizations get to a certain size, they become run by rationalists. And he uses the concept of a beehive to explain that beehives survive by bees locating sources of nectar. They do the waggle dance when they get back, going, oh, there's a good source of food for us 200 yards this way down there. And he points out that that is, if that's all they did, bees would die out. So a percentage of the hive are allowed to, and I'm going to use a technical phrase here, sod off and do their own thing and come back and say, oh, there's something we didn't know about over here. Waggle, 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 off we go. And most rational organizations, particularly banks and financial institutions, like their figures, how to measure and how to see what's going on. And I found, and this is a purely personal judgmental view, that the best FinCrime professionals think outside the box from time to time. And they take the information that Des used about, well, actually, this is a well-known flower growing area. Why are you shipping stuff through it? And go, hang on, Roly Mo, this really doesn't work.
I have a different approach to thinking outside the box. I have for well over 2 decades said, don't think outside the box, deny there's a box.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I think that the problem we have is we are driven into boxes. With what we were talking about a few minutes ago, it reminded me of something that I had a discussion with the then chairman of Lloyd's Bank. And he was saying, we are planning to basically turn our branches into marketing hubs. This was in 1998. And at that point, Midland, which it was unofficially part of HSBC, but for regulated reasons had not been actually put together. Across the road from the bar that I used to use as an office in Ludgate Hill, had a branch which was pure machines. There was nothing there. There was no human contact except a guard. And so we looked at this. So from 1998, we've gone, for many reasons, some of which include the fact that we've not been able to actually do face-to-face contact with people for a while, and then all the ramifications of that. But we've now got to the point where non-face-to-face contact is the norm. So technology has been brought in to try to deal with the shortcomings of that, and failed. To my view, if you've got a system that has more than a 1% failure rate of identifying people, then the system is useless. You can't say, oh, well, we get 90% of people, so that's all right. No. So we've taken technology to the point where it has eradicated the human contact, which was necessary in both the know your customer, but also the know your customer's business. So nobody has as we moved from that to where there is no consistent contact through what happened years ago, the call centers. And every time you talk to somebody in a call center, you have to tell them the whole story. except they don't want to know because they've got a 3-minute turnaround time.
Yeah.
But so you have to tell them the whole story because they do not go back and look at what they've already learned. And this is where, says he, bringing the whole thing right up to date. This is exactly what happens with generative technology. You can give it an instruction, it will do what it wants to do. You can say, I want to change something in that, or you've got that wrong. And instead of modifying it, most of them, one or two have started to change it slightly, but most of them, instead of modifying it, they recreate it again from scratch. And so every single conversation has to go right back to basics every time. And even then, they misinterpret it because they don't have the right language. I'm talking about machines here, don't have the right language, don't have the background, they don't have the culture, they don't have the context. And so what they're doing is just guesswork. And we know humans do this guesswork. We know there's lots of research into the fact that if humans don't have all the necessary data, they will guess and try to fill it in. But the difference is when a human does that, the human knows he's doing it, and they know, and he knows that he's able to say, here is my analysis of this set of facts, but I didn't know this, and this. So I've made these assumptions. That's not what you get with generative software. You get an end result that says this is the result of what you put in, and frequently it absolutely is not.
I think we need to hand to Des to the final thought here to bring us into some form of compliance with what we originally thought we were talking about, and then went off on these fascinating rabbit hole. But I was just going to point out that at the end of this, the other thing is that one of the things that banks in the UK have certainly done over the last few years is to strip out certain functions and make them centrally telephone based, one of which are the bereavement services. And I can say from personal experience, there is nothing worse than repeating every time you call these departments, different banks, different people, never the same person, the story of a family member's suicide. And the survivors have to go through this apparently to get anything to work. And again, it's very patchy. And this is the sort of thing where the stripping out of human contact has, to my mind, severely impacted on the quality of service from financial institutions. And also
on the mental state of the people using them.
Correct. But Des, go on, sir. Bring us home safely with one of your excellent observations that you always keep us honest with.
I really can't. I'm amazed by both your insights, both Mark and Nigel. I'm sorry. I'm in awe at the moment, and I have nothing more to say.
You can come again.
So because we were speaking fluently instead of our normal stuff. You've just witnessed the power of an advocate in full flow, haven't you?
But look, when this goes out, I would appreciate people getting a hold of us on YouTube, commenting on the video, or commenting to us on LinkedIn. You know where to find us. The Old Codgers are here. And, come 2026, come the new challenges, come the critical thinking that I think we are building.
It could be broken down into parts 1 and 2. The diatribe continues and something like that.
Well, for today, no, I'm going to release the whole thing as a single program, so people can understand that that you can start off with something which is quite clearly defined. We knew what we were going to talk about at the beginning, and we've talked about the same thing when we've come to the end. But in the middle, what we've done is join up exactly the kind of random lives that people in our world have to live. But they're told you can live in these little narrow lanes. And don't worry, the technology will keep you in your lane. Well, it won't. It'll drive you off a fucking cliff.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. So you can go. You can either take that one. The other one was going through my mind as you were talking was a random walk with the Old Codgers Club.
Yeah, we could see that. 3 pints in.
3 pints in.
3 pints in.
Well,
3 pints in.
Julia's quite interested in bringing back the chinwags.
I think we should.
Yeah, I think we could do that. I mean, it's today has shown that there is still mileage in the old idea that we shut down a little while ago. So there you are, viewers. We want to know. Go and have a look at the chinwags programs that are already on FinCrimeTV. and give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and
Mhm.
tell us whether you want the Chinwag series to return. They are generally a little more structured than this, but only a little. Are we done?
Gentlemen, as always, we are.
Yeah.
It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm turning off the recording now.